Hello and welcome to another episode of the Way We Grow podcast. Today our guest is Autumn, or at Autumn Grows Dro on Instagram. She is a home grower and a commercial cultivator. I'm your host, Nick Wolfe, or Mr. Wolfe Grows on Instagram and Reddit. And so Autumn, how are you doing today? What's new in your grow world?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me here, by the way. I'm excited to
Absolutely.
talk. And I just started a new soil grow. When I learned doing rock wool. So now I'm learning soil. It's pretty interesting.
Cool, and what type of soil are you using in it?
It's peat moss, perlite, and it's actually my coworkers kind of like setup.
Okay, like their blend or something?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I can look for it. He definitely sent it over to me.
Oh, so it sounds like you're using like sort of like a living soil setup or something with is it like a water only system for that or?
S- No, I'm using nutrients as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Just using a different substrate rather than rock wool.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I'll just get right into some of these questions. So what was your first experience growing? Did you start growing other plants before you started growing cannabis?
So I kind of go back to like high school or middle school when you learned in science class to grow a seed in a bag with the paper. I did that, but I never
Okay.
did it at home. So my first grow actually was cannabis over a year
Oh,
ago,
nice.
and
Okay.
it led me to growing vegetables and fruits now. So I grow both.
Nice. Yeah, we like to say that cannabis is the gateway drug to gardening.
Yes.
It feels like if you weren't growing vegetables or fruit or anything like that before, you all of a sudden get interested because you see how fast and vigorous like a cannabis plant can grow, and you're like, oh, I can do other things now, and yeah, it just
Absolutely.
leads you into the garden as a whole. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what got you into growing cannabis then? Did you I mean, were you a user beforehand? Were you just interested in it? Like, what got you into it?
So it starts back in high school. I actually sold cannabis in high school. I was kind of like your high school plug per se.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started off with that, and then um, last year I started smoking Jungle Boy's flower, and I really liked it. I enjoyed the taste. I was curious to how they grow it, so I started watching videos on YouTube, and I was like, I need to do this myself. I've always wanted to grow at home, but I never had like the equipment or room. So finally, last year, I had everything ready to go. I was luckily able to finance equipment through Amazon. So it made it a lot easier for me to start and just get equipment through the stages than getting everything at once. And uh, it was hard financially to get started. So having that
For sure.
finance helped a lot.
Okay, cool. And so is that just kind of like a payment plan thing where you get to like pay it off over time, kind of?
Absolutely, yeah. It's through Amazon. It's
Okay.
called a firm, and you can
Okay.
pick your APR and what you want to do for your payment plan. So it's really affordable that way to start.
Okay. Well, I didn't even know that that was like a thing. But that's really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
it does help people get into it if they can't necessarily like, because it is really expensive to get into it, especially like some of the
Yes.
lights and even the different nutrients, and if you want different like control equipment or monitoring equipment, that can start to get really pricey really quick.
Oh yeah.
And as a home grower, just wanting to get into it, I could understand not necessarily having all those funds around. I think I put mine together slowly but surely as well, where it was like, I think I started in, I built a tent out of just like some spare lumber that was around, and like moving blankets and mylar blankets on the
Wow.
inside for like the reflective surface, and then like I found like $100 LED light on Amazon. I think it was like 5 years ago or 5.5 years ago now, and it was kind of a piece of crap, but it still worked, and I grew runts, and it was awesome. Turned out
Nice.
really nice.
Was that when you first started
But
growing
then
at
after
home?
that's like when I first started growing, where I was like really putting effort into trying to learn about how to like best grow cannabis. Because before that, my partner and I had some plants growing at one apartment that we lived at, and we had I've always been users. And before that, my dad grew, and I like had one plant, I think, in high school or something. It was but in earnest, it was only like 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. But okay, so let's see.
You evolved pretty quickly in
Oh,
5 years.
I a lot of reading and a lot of time on like forums and listening to videos and more reading, and then applying those practices as much as I could. So I tried to immediately get into like the commercial space, and from there it was just kind of every place that I worked at, I learned something new and I was able to apply it. And when I had a home grow, it was yeah, it was all applied at home, so I could kind of reaffirm the actions rather than just seeing how other people did it. I could understand sort of the processes behind it. But yeah, I feel like in a lot, there's so much accessible information nowadays that it's easy to learn a lot in a short amount of time. If it's like not only your hobby, but you put your professional time into it as well, as I'm sure you know. Like, so back to your story. So you started growing at home just a little over a year ago, and uh, tell us kind of your process of how you figured out how you wanted to grow, and then the processes you used, because you were pretty successful early on. I've been kind of following your story since you started on Instagram when you were first helping manage someone else's cannabis account. So let's like talk about a little of like where your processes came from.
So it did start when I started smoking Jungle Boy's flower. That's when I started really researching like the Athena nutrients line, which is what I use, and using rock wool.
Okay.
I kind of copied what Jungle Boys does. I first started off with the 4-inch cubes, and when I met my mentor, Matt, which I found him off YouTube searching Rockroll Grows. His were really, he just had a lot of information and more like scientific facts. And I liked that about his page. So I actually reached out to him and said, "Hey, could you help me grow? I'm on my first grow. I'm growing in 4-inch cubes using Athena. Could you help me from start to finish?" And he was more than willing to help me. He would call me, email me, text me, just tell me everything that he knows, and I listened to everything he told me, and I was successful that way. I believe growing in general that it's important to have help and other resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So what were some of the like the first methods that you were told would work for you? And like when you said that you followed the Athena method or the Jungle Boys method, are you referring to kind of like their handbook and sort of what they had like described about in there? And then yeah, what, like how did you go about that first grow?
So they have a YouTube video on how to grow and how they do it. So I kind
Oh,
of
cool.
just rewinded it and just paused and just wrote down everything list by list, like what do I need to start. And then when I went to a hydroponics store my first time, I bought Athena products there, and they gave me a free handbook when I bought Athena, and
Oh, that's
I
cool.
started learning more through the handbook. Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you think, since you have been growing for a somewhat shorter amount of time, and it seems as though you've made significant changes in your grow from like each of your grows, how do you feel like those changes have gone, and sort of what has been like the things that you've learned from those different changes?
So I feel like each grow I advance and I just learn more and more in general, even with my setups. Um, right now, I don't have a proper drainage system for my plants, but I make it work. I have little caddies they sit on, and they have drainage trays, so I have to manually drain out the trays, and I get a lot of floods because of that. But luckily, they're up
Okay.
above. They're up above,
Right.
and I've learned throughout growing of how many irrigation shots that I should be giving my plants, so that way I don't get so much runoff.
Okay.
And these words that I'm using, I would have never used in my very first grow. Like, I would have no idea to
For
say
sure.
irrigation shots and runoff. It's just stuff, like, kind of words you just learn over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I feel like it is a really there's so much specifically within like the commercial or the cultivation culture of cannabis, where we have these terms that we've created as a community over like however many decades of growing, and even some of those terms have changed and evolved over time, but a lot of it was because it was almost like you had to talk about it this way, because it was illegal and you didn't want people to know exactly what you were talking about. But even now there seems to be a lot of like, not necessarily proprietary, but it feels like a lot of it is just very unique to cannabis and to cannabis cultivation. Shots might not be. I don't know if that's referred to in other forms of like horticulture or agriculture where they use drip emitters, and because like there's some tomatoes that are grown on rock wool, and there's a lot of other crops grown on rock wool and hydroponic systems and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a great point where like a lot of people hear this stuff if they're trying to get into cultivation and they don't really understand these different terms. What do you think was one of like the other than the terminology, what do you think was one of the biggest learning curves you had like getting into growing? Like what were some of the things that you found to need the most of your attention when learning about it?
I think it's really important to know each stage for sure, and know when your plants are ready to switch. And it's really important to have a handbook or some kind of dosage for your nutrients. I feel like that helps protect you from any deficiencies if you have something to look at and measure by. I believe that's really important. And also like learning the steps that you need to do for each stage. When I first grew, I didn't really realize there was all these steps that you needed to do at a certain day or week. Now that I am in a commercial setting, I have learned more of like, for instance, day 10 is the day that we like to skirt our plants or lollipop.
Okay.
Some others might think, differently or do things differently, and that's fine. But I've just learned throughout, growing that there's a bunch of different times and certain days that you should do things to not stress your plants out and to have a better grow.
Yeah, that's very true. And I feel like so much of it is somewhat subjective. Like for me, I don't like to do any of the skirting until the plants have finished stretching and
Okay.
like finished their flower set.
I
But
agree.
I think, depending on depending on the setup, it could be beneficial. Because I know one thing I've seen when pruning early in the stretch is you get a little bit of a vegetative response. So like the plants will sometimes get a little bit taller than they might otherwise. So if you have a large space or if you have a canopy that needs to be filled up still, that might be beneficial. But if you have a smaller space or a lower ceiling height or something, then you really want to make sure that you're just getting the plants to stretch as much as they will based on your irrigation practices or the genetic potential of the plant or otherwise, and that way when you prune, they kind of just stay right where they are already.
That makes a lot of sense, because this grow, I listened to what my bosses say in Skirt at day 10, and I have some sativas. This is my first time growing sativas, so it's pretty fun. And I was expecting really tall plants, but my strawberry cough ended up being really short, and it could be because I skirted too early. And, and
I think also some of the genetics, like when they say like sativa or indica, it can sometimes be a little misleading because it's like some sativas now are so far bred away from where they were that it's sometimes like the effects that are described as sativa versus the growth pattern. Because I usually like to describe it as like equatorial versus I forget the other one, but basically like if it's near the equator versus every latitude that it goes up and gets further away from the equator, I feel like they get squatter and squatter, just based on the lighting cycles and stuff. But yeah, sometimes I feel like that might be a little bit misleading in terms of what you would assume the structure to be as a grower.
Yeah.
When someone says sativa or indica. So let's talk then about like what your current grow right now. So why don't you go over sort of what you're doing for your hydroponic setup, and then what you're doing for your with the rock wool, and then how it differs from what you're doing with the potting mix based grow.
So, in my experience right now, I want to say hydroponics is easier. It's just less headache. Even with nutrients, I use 3 different nutrients: core, bloom, and grow. Just 3 things. And then with the soil, I'm using like 8 to 10 different things, and it just kind of feels like I'm more like a scientist in soil growing, but but I feel like it takes more time to measure everything out, get everything precise. And for my hydroponic grow, it's super quick. I can weigh out everything super fast and have my reservoir ready in like 10 minutes. But it took me like half an hour just to do 4 gallons for my soil grow. Just adding all the little, things, nutrients.
When you're using the Athena for your hydroponics, are you using the Athena Pro line?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that 3-part fertilizers are really easy.
I love it.
It does make life really easy. And then so when you're doing the Athena, are you running like any like supplemental CO2, anything else? And then like what are you running your EC at, and kind of what are some of the targets that you shoot for? Because a lot of your grows do look really nice, and for someone that has only been growing for a little over a year, it's really great to see people that have success, because it shows that other people can do this too at home without, if they enjoy smoking cannabis or if they enjoy consuming it and they don't want to keep spending the money, but they also enjoy like the hobby of gardening. I feel like it's really important for people to see that they can be successful in their grows at home early on.
Oh yeah, it's very doable for sure. But I think having a mentor definitely helped me learn things a lot quicker, understand things better. If I didn't have someone to guide me, I probably would be a little held back and maybe not know as much as I do now, for sure. I was running CO2, and it's kind of expensive, to be honest. I was running through it like every week, a 25-pound tank, and I was spending $45 every week on it, and it just became too expensive.
Wow.
I didn't notice a huge difference not having it, but it did hurt me because when I ran out, I didn't have an exhaust in one of my grows, and I experienced some mold problems. and I lost probably like, I don't know. I yielded 1.5 pounds, and I could have gotten like at least 2 pounds. So I feel like that hurt me a little bit and set me back. But instead of running CO2, I got an exhaust, and hopefully no mold this time.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, definitely if you're running CO2 in a tent, and it's really hard if you're especially if you're like getting into the beginning of summer or something along those lines, where everything starts to heat up and you have all that transpiration. Yeah, it becomes really hard to mitigate mold if you're not exhausting that extra humidity. And usually I find, like, especially with tent grows, that exhaust is so important that CO2 can sometimes, you do run into, like, where you're just running through it so quickly, or the fact that the tents are usually, mesh and they're semi-permeable. You have a little bit of loss through the zippers and the different ducts and whatnot.
Makes
So
sense.
it does become a little bit, like, hard to keep up with the cost of it, even if it does get you a little bit more like chunky flowers at the end of it.
Yeah.
So I get that. I've always wanted to run CO2 at home, but I feel like you would have to then, like, have this whole setup, and
You
it
need
was just something
backups.
that I never was able to do. Yeah. Yeah, you need, like, air conditioning, and you need
Yeah. Definitely. Air conditioning.
dehumidification and all these different things, and
And
all that adds
it's
on
a
to your electrical
exactly.
cost.
Yeah. So I don't think it's that important. Even though if you look at videos on YouTube, they're always like, "Oh, use CO2. It's gonna help your yield," and it might, but it's gonna cost you a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. Like in a commercial space where you have the ability to air condition and control humidity and other environmental factors, then it it almost would make uh, it would make less sense to not run it. You almost have to run it in order for the all the equipment to run at peak performance, and for you to increase your yields by that amount. I always think, like, it's not like you get, like, this double return, though, where, like, if you can add CO2 and then peak like all the other parameters out, like your ppfd and your temperature and humidity and the differentials for all the different settings for day and night and whatnot. You still probably won't double your output if you add CO2, but if you're able to get everything else to that point, then it seems like it's still worth it no matter what. But yeah, not necessarily in a home grow. That's a totally different situation.
That's what my mentor taught me to do, because he does that at his home grows, but he has an open space, so it makes it a lot better to use if you have an open space, I believe.
Like a room or something that he has, like,
Yeah,
sealed off or something.
exactly. Like you
Okay.
were saying with the tents, it's just not it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't use CO2 again unless I have open space or a bigger grow going on. But it was fun to
Fair
learn.
enough. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't hurt. It makes me think of those, like, those exhaust bags, or I forget what they're called, but they're basically
Yes.
like a mushroom block that you can wet down and hang inside the grow, and because mushrooms produce CO2, so you're all just making CO2 with mushrooms. But
What's funny is I bought one of those bags. And then
yeah,
my mentor was like, just get a tank. And I returned the bag. I'd never even used it.
well, I
But
don't know how much they actually produce,
yeah.
because I've seen people where, I think at one point on like the Build a Soil YouTube channel, he had his 10 by 10 tent and he exhausted into it from a mushroom tent, so it pulled all the CO2 and
Interesting.
cooler air into that tent. And I was like, that's not a bad idea, especially if
super
you're in,
smart.
like, Colorado, like he is,
Yeah.
and you're pulling all that extra humidity into the tent as well to compensate. So
What a great
I'm
idea.
like, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, right.
That's
Makes
smart.
me want to, like, grow some oyster mushrooms and some shiitake mushrooms.
Yes.
Um,
I want to do that too.
yeah, right. And I so I had grown organically at one point in, like, a 30-gallon pot, and
Wow.
used a local like super soil
Indoor?
living living soil blend and indoor. Yep, and
Wow.
it produced so much CO2 that like the parts per million at the surface of the substrate were like 800,
Wow.
and so it like made it did its own thing because it
Yeah.
had all the fungal colonies in the substrate already, basically acted like a giant mushroom block.
That's crazy.
So that was pretty cool.
That's really cool.
So yeah,
How much did you yield off your plant, if I can ask? Do you remember?
off of it was one plant under
Yeah.
in a 4x4 area, and I I only weighed like a quarter of it because by the time that I had it all dried and done, I had kind of just like divvied it up and then realized I hadn't weighed it, so I weighed what was the remaining quarter of it, and it was like 2.1 pounds out of that one space, the one area, and it was under a 340 watt LED, so it was pretty good for that, little over 2 grams per watt,
Yeah.
and that was pretty nice. And it was like one single plant too in this giant pot. I think I vegged it for like a month and a half. It was crazy,
Wow.
but it was fun.
Yeah.
So you have, so tell us a little bit more then about your hydroponic setup. What EC are you running, and what are some of the other targets that you usually look for?
So, in early veg, I start off with 1.0 EC. At my job, they start off 3.0 and run it all the way 3.0 from start to finish. But I was taught to start at like 1.0 and then kind of work your way up slowly to 3.0 EC. But for the
Do you
runoff,
see a difference between those two methods? Sorry, sorry
Oh,
for a
no.
little sidetrack,
No,
but
you're fine.
do you see a difference between those two methods?
I do. I see less stress and kind of like I didn't really have deficiency, but just more stress for sure. And I had some yellowing going on, but nothing too concerning when I was just pushing 3.0 from the start to end. I like to ease up. I feel like that helps better for the plants, or
Okay.
they like it better.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely, I feel like I hear that a lot, so it's good to just have one more anecdotal evidence to say so.
I feel like commercially they kind of they start at 3.0 just to like push it and get it, going. Because commercial is just bam, bam, fast. Let's get these in and get them out, But at home,
Yep.
you can have the patience and start off slow with your EC and, get all the way to 3.0 or. But with my EC runoff.
And all the plants get a little bit of extra treatment too, because you got the time to take to hang out with each plant individually, basically.
Yes. And for the runoff, I was taught to not go over 9 EC. But I've also been taught to not go over 7 EC. So, I mean, I've gone over 9, and yeah, I had
In your
some
runoff EC.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I noticed it was kind of towards the end, like around week 5 or 6, where my runoff was that high. And it was good. The colors were coming in great, but the leaves were just kind of getting a little crispy, burnt tips. But, I mean, it's part of like the fade per se. So,
Mm-hmm.
but right now I'm having my EC runoff at 7. I'm trying not to go past that, and my plants seem pretty happy with that.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen EC like way in the runoff way over 9, and it was like I think sometimes it depends on the size of the substrate as well. So if you like have like a 4-inch rock wool, and you have a really high EC coming out of it, and you're also getting a pretty big dryback, then typically like I think like at the point of dryback, the EC in the substrate is going to be more than what the runoff EC is going to be, just because of the lack of water. And as the water like goes away and any salts that are left in there, it just keeps compounding how much salt is felt by the roots in terms of the osmotic stress. And so if you have a bigger pot though, and you can have like, if you have 9.0 EC runoff in that, but then it's not drying back as far, usually that still means that like the pore water EC isn't spiking up past or to the same point that the smaller substrate was. So I could see how, like, especially in Rockwool, just how dry sometimes they can get between the end of the day and the first irrigation. Yeah, you could probably get some pretty darn high ECs in there and get a little bit of that tip burning and stuff. I could see that. Did you find though that when you were getting that little extra stress in the plants, did you feel as though the terpene profile or any of the other like secondary metabolites and tertiary metabolites, like the trichome production and the cannabinoid production increase? Because sometimes I see like the trichome production just goes crazy when you get all these really far drybacks and high ECs, and sometimes you can start to get these really pungent days where they start to really smell.
Yes. I noticed, like, how would I say it? Just like more colors coming in, and yeah, more smells. And it seemed like I was getting a lot of moisture too in the buds, and maybe that's why I had some mold issues too.
Okay. When you say like you were getting a lot of moisture in the buds, what do you mean by that?
You could just,
like, were you seeing stuff on the buds, or?
no, but you could just tell like that they were wet by when you would defold. Like when you take off a leaf, it just seemed super like wet. You know what I mean? Than my other grow. When I pulled off leaves from my other grow, it was kind of more like a dry. When the leaves came off, it would just like snap off. But with the higher EC, the leaves felt more wet.
Oh, interesting. Almost like they were a little bit more leathery or something. Like they had a kind of a thicker, like the leaf was almost thicker or something, or?
I guess when you pull a leaf off, and sometimes they come off like super crispy, and then sometimes they come off and you get like a little like I guess they say it's like the plant's blood or whatever when you pull off a leaf, but I felt like I feel like it's just the moisture.
And it kind of like, okay, I see what you're saying. Like almost like where you break it off at water, water will come out of the plant or something. Okay, yeah, definitely. Like it has like there's a high water pressure in the stem.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking
Cool.
for.
When you see that happening, do the plants usually have a lot of turgor, like where all the leaves are kind of praying up towards the light?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely. So like the turgor of the plants is usually based on like how much internal water pressure is in the vascular structure of the plant. So yeah, if you pop leaves off, then I've definitely noticed that as well. Like sometimes I've just been popping leaves and I'll get like splashes on my glasses, and I'll be like, what is that? I'll wipe it, but it's like plant juice, so it kind of just makes my glasses all smudged and smeared, and so I'm just like, oh yeah, I totally have experienced that as well. So okay then, so does that mean then you're ramping up your grow at home up to 3.0 EC?
Yes.
Is that like kind of where you'll end at before you, and then do you taper it back down then from there towards the end of the grow?
Yes, so that's what my teacher taught me to do, to just lower your EC every other day or so, and just kind of go by each like point and come down to like 1.0 or 1.5. But I've only done that, I feel like, once. The other times I've just kept it at 3.0 till harvest day.
Nice.
And it was smooth. It didn't taste harsh. I've never flushed my plants before. I might try that this time, just by flushing it with maybe just some RO water at the last 3 days. I just want to try different things to see what happens.
Sure.
If I can get a better taste, colors, smells, stuff like that. I did move up to 6-inch Hugos now. I started off with the 4-inch cubes. on my first grow, and then my mentor told me if you want to grow commercially, you should try the 6-inch cubes. So I tried those, and I've noticed way bigger plants with the 6-inch, and just bigger colas.
For sure. Do you notice? Because sometimes I feel like going from a 4-inch to a 6-inch cube, you can tend to overwater a little bit early on with the 6-inch cube if you're used to watering in a 4-inch cube, and the drybacks that a 4-inch will get even early on in veg. Did you find that you were getting like excess leaf production or longer internodes between the different flower sites on the plant as it grew, or did you feel as though it just kind of you didn't notice too much of a difference in that, in terms of like how you felt as though it, like if it's like generative leaning where it's like a lot of flower production versus vegetative leaning where it kind of has more leafy flowers and longer internodes and stuff like that?
I feel like with the 6-inch, it was more of a leafy internodes. Yeah. I just, overall, it's just, they seem like bigger plants in 6-inch. But maybe that's just because I used 4-inch my first grow, and now that I'm evolving, maybe I'm just getting bigger plants. Who knows?
For sure. I always say that to people when they're like, they'll implement, early on in their grow career, they'll add something new to their grower, or they'll change something, and they'll go, oh, this change made me a better grower. And I always tell them, I'm like, no, the fact that you grew one more time makes you a better grower.
Yes.
Usually it's just the experience that helps people get better, and they're just taking the experience from each successive harvest and applying it to the next one. And usually, yeah, it's sometimes it's a culmination of both, though. Like if you were doing something either to hinder yourself, or if you do implement something that is beneficial to the grow, it can be then in conjunction with the increase in skill as well. So that's a good point. So okay, then I feel like that kind of gives us a good picture of how you grow hydroponically with your rock wool. So tell us more about your new setup that you're trying out with the potting soil, the peat-based media.
So it's a little like I'm kind of going at it blindly a little, because my coworker has this tent that he let me borrow behind me. It's the same one I use for my hydro grow. They're both gorilla tents. My hydro has the 4x4, and the soil grow I'm doing is a 5x5.
Okay.
With the 4x4, I'm using ion LED lights, 20 watts, and with the soil, it's a Fluence LED lights. I'm not sure how many watts though.
Okay, it's probably like 720 or 780 if it's the one that I see right behind you there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. Cool.
So as nutrients, it seems like I have everything individually. Some are in liquids, and then some are in powdered form.
Okay.
The nitrogen is in powdered form. It's like a soybean base nitrogen. And then I have phosphate, carbon, silica, and they're all in liquid forms.
Okay. What brand is it that you're using?
I have no idea. There's no brand name, or it's just in random bottles like this.
Oh, okay. And this is from your coworker?
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like they make
their
nitrogen. Own. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little different.
Interesting.
Yeah, he said it's kind of like a secret that his mentor came up with the nutrients and everything, so he doesn't really tell me much about it, but he just tells me the measurements. Okay. Yeah, so I'm kind of going at it blindly.
Have you taken like an EC or a pH measurement of the solution that you're adding?
No, but I've tested my EC with just carbon and nitrogen, and my EC, or it was ppm. It was at like 700 ppm. I think that's like zero point 0.5 EC or something. Starting off low.
I think it's depending some of the ppms. I always forget if it's you double the ppm
You
and
multiply it
divide it
times
by a
two.
thousand.
Uh huh.
Yeah, double and then divide by a
Mm-hmm.
thousand. So 700 would be like 1.4
Okay.
EC.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But so is that, and that's just two parts of it, and then you add all these other parts as well.
Yes. They're like all these little
Okay.
bottles, separate things. It's a
Is it
lot.
like a milliliter of this,
Yes.
a gram of
Yes.
this?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so it's just a bunch of little tiny things. Okay. And when you're
Yes.
watering these, are you watering them to runoff, or are you
Yes.
avoiding runoff with this?
So I'm doing runoff, and then I'm also
Okay.
doing some flushing with the soil, like once a week, flushing. I
Okay.
started them off in Rockwool cubes, like the starter plugs. So I kind of had to do some flushing to get the salts out, and then start with the organic nutrients.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a lot to have like 8 different types of nutrients going on and having to measure like of an eighth of a teaspoon and times that by how many gallons I'm doing. So it's kind of a headache, to be honest.
I mean,
But
anything that was over like however many parts always kind of I like shied away from them earlier on. Like at one point I think I was mixing like 10 or 12 different parts at this one grow I was working at, and then we'd like mix them all and then hand water all the plants with it. And it just seemed like such a hassle. And then
time
I tried
consuming, I'm
even at
sure.
home, like it's time consuming, absolutely. And it just, I never saw anything that I was like so blown away with that I was just like, wow, this is the truth. This is exactly how we should be growing this plant. And then I saw like living soil where it was just water only, and that I was just like, oh well, this seems really easy.
yeah.
But then re-amending it started to become something that did require, like, if you wanted to do it at scale or at a very like either professional or scientific level of understanding exactly what was going on, so that you could make like a fully educated adjustment or addition, if it's like a dry amendment or some sort of tea or something, you would need to do all these like substrate saturated paste tests, and then even compare it to like sap analysis of the plant and other things like that, so that you could understand sort of how those nutrient packets were impacting the soil, and then how that was over time translating to the plant. And so you could kind of like if you were doing it consistently, you could see the trends over time of what was in the plant, and then there were some resources online that you could see where those targets were that you would want, and you could increase or lower than what your nutrient package was that you were adding to the substrate. But that's something that's like, it's only available to do that at a commercial level, because each one of those tests is like either $100 or more, and if you're doing it weekly or monthly, then that also, it's like the CO2 in a home grow. It's like it's untenable. You can't necessarily afford that if one of the ideas for home growing is to grow your own medicine, then like increasing the price of it almost makes it, in some cases, especially when you have readily accessible cannabis in a medical or a recreational market, sometimes it ends up being cheaper, especially with the commercial race to the bottom, where everyone's just trying to get as much product sold for the lowest amount, and it sometimes doesn't even matter if it's super high quality.
Yeah. I can agree. For sure. Yep.
Well, so how are you liking this organic grow style? I mean, other than the time-consuming part.
Yeah, I really don't like the time consuming part. That is not it for me. I don't like it. But so when I first started, I cut clones off my hydro grow and nursed them into veg and put them in the soil. And I noticed, because I was just using carb and carbon, not nitrogen at first. So I started noticing yellowing and deficiencies, and I was like, oh no, I'm already messing up the soil grow. But my coworker was just like, oh, just add nitrogen, the yellowing should go away quickly. And I'm like, really? Okay. So I added nitrogen. The next day, I noticed the yellowing just kind of slowly going away. But within a day, the yellowing was almost gone. Um,
That's awesome. That's
yeah,
fast acting for something
it
that's
is.
like in an organic system. It makes me want to know like what it is. It sounds like almost like a soy hydrolysate or something like that, where it's like a amino-based nitrogen source.
Maybe. I
Something
think it
that's like
is.
right there, readily available. That's pretty cool.
It
It
kind of
makes me
sounded
think.
like what you were saying too, like with the living soil and kind of adding like your own ingredients and seeing how the plant reacts. It's kind of like that.
Yep. Yeah, I could see how it. You know, it's probably good for all new growers to use something that requires them to pay attention to the plant's needs,
Yeah.
and then find a response appropriate that kind of addresses those needs, and so that you can see the progress of the plant from your additions. Because I feel like sometimes when it's like if you do hydroponics and you do it correctly, or if you follow directions and you're not necessarily trying to be
So easy.
yeah, like if you follow the directions, in the most cases they work really well. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of directions out there that are unique to the specific nutrients or unique to a specific environment. And so a lot of these different recipes are somewhat subjective because they need to follow specific parameters. But if you like follow all the instructions, you should be good.
Yeah.
As long as you don't try to get fancy, or try to be like, I'm gonna double this or half
Yeah.
this just because I want to see what happens. Like, sure, see what happens, but it probably you're
Not
going
be
to see
great.
like what a deficiency looks like, or
Exactly.
a toxicity looks like. But yeah, with like a organic grow or something where you do like, I'm adding this for nitrogen, or this for calcium, or this for magnesium, or this for potassium, phosphorus, all the different constituents. I could see how that could be pretty helpful, especially if you like do it long enough where you go, okay, I'm just going to pull a bunch of phosphorus out of the nutrient package and let's see what happens. So you can then like document it almost and be like, I know that this works when I have the phosphorus at X level, and if I bring it down to Y level, this is what happens. And so if you then see that happening, you can go, oh, I need to add more phosphorus.
I like that you
So
put it that way, in kind of like a learning way of growing, because you're adding one component at different times or whatever, not like how with Athena it's all together in one, so you're not going to really have to stress about phosphorus or
Yeah.
silica separately or whatever. And like you're saying, you could add a bunch of phosphorus, and if the plant loves it, then okay, cool, it loves that. Check off the list. Yeah, it's more like a science experiment.
Exactly. Yeah, there's I brought it up in the last podcast, but I might as well bring it up again. But there's a term or a theory or a law. It's called Liebig's law, I believe. But basically, what it is it's kind of like the law of minimums almost, where you can only achieve your greatest results based on what is the lowest available nutrient in like a growth system. And so like sometimes it'll be described as like staves in a barrel, so like a wine barrel where all the different staves that kind of go around the outside of the barrel are all tightly compressed together, but they're all at the same height, and so you can fill the wine in the barrel up to that height. But if one of those staves is cut lower, then even though all those other levels are all the way up at the top, the wine can only fill up to where that lowest stave is. So it, like if that's your limiting factor, then even if you have all these other elements within the grow at their peak or at their like ideal levels, you'll never be able to see what results that those can truly provide if there's something else that isn't at its most ideal level in sort of that same specific environment that you're providing all these things in. Because like sometimes like more humidity in one environment is not as good as more humidity in another environment, whether it be like CO2 lighting, heat,
absolutely,
exhaust, all these different things that can have an effect on that.
yes.
But it's cool to see a newer grower like yourself using these different tools of a hydroponic grow and then a hand mixed, painstaking organic grow.
Yeah.
Because it'll round you out as a grower, though. It's great to see other people doing that, because I felt like that was one of the ways that I learned the most, is just going to different styles of growing. Almost every second grow I would switch it up. Like I'd do the first grow, it would either work or it wouldn't work that well. I'd do it again the second time, and I'd usually get it to work, and then I'd go, okay, this is boring, I'm gonna do something else.
Switch it up.
And then and then it like started at hydroponics and ended at hydroponics for me, because it's so easy. Like
You use cocoa, right?
Yeah, at work we use cocoa.
Have you done rockwool grows?
At the facility. Yeah, so at the facility that I manage, we've done cocoa, and we do cocoa now, and we have for quite some time, but we've done rockwool as well, where we did the slabs where you have 3 plants per slab, on the 4-inch cubes, and that worked really well. We've done 4-inch cubes for veg, and then we set those on top of cocoa pots and let them root into the cocoa pots, and go about it that way. But there is like a little bit of a intense osmotic gradient between rockwool and cocoa, where the cocoa wants to pull all the water out of the rockwool. So you have to provide all these little irrigation shots early on to make sure that it roots in correctly, and usually that keeps it a little bit too vegetative early on, and you don't get that, it's not as easy to build the EC early in flower in the substrate.
Makes sense.
Which usually we aim for, to get that generative response of a lot of flower sets and stuff. But yeah, I just want to say it's really cool to see another person entering their cannabis cultivation journey and using these different methods to learn from.
Yeah, I like to learn all different aspects, every way you can do it. Let's learn it and find the best way to do it. That's my goal.
For sure.
At my job, they they grow everything in rockwool, right? Even our moms are in rockwool cubes, but just recently they started switching over to cocoa for the moms, just because the 6-inch Hugos aren't big enough to hold those moms, and our moms were flopping over every day, and it was just a mess. And so I think now that they switched to cocoa,
if they're that big.
Yeah. So yeah, switching over to cocoa, I'm assuming they're liking it better. I haven't been up in veg since they've done that, but all the moms now are in cocoa. No more rockwool for them. So
cool. Cocoa can also be a little bit cheaper. You can get a little bit of a larger substrate size for the same price as rockwool. So like I think those 6-inchers, especially if they're Grodan, I think those are getting up there in price now, above like $4 a piece, and I think you can get a 2-gallon cocoa pot for like $1.50 to $2 a piece. So you can get a lot more substrate out of it, and a lot more run time out of each mom. But I always personally suggest, even in home grows and commercial spaces, to keep your mom lifespan to no longer than like 8 weeks at the max. I usually shoot for like between 6 and 8 weeks. Sometimes they'll
That's
go into
short.
10 weeks, but that's usually if it's like a, yeah, it's usually if it's like a, like something that I'm needing to keep around for genetic preservation or something. Um, yeah, some of the larger moms, actually, like sometimes they'll go up to like, what, like 90 days. If like it's in a much larger pot, and if I up pot it like once a month, it really depends on kind of what time of year it is and how long we need to keep moms around for. But I like to keep them around for as little amount of time as possible. Sometimes you just get like fungus gnat populations.
Yes, yes. We have a lot of fungus gnats, and they have us top down the moms every week. There's probably like, I don't know, like 30 different strains of moms. There's just a lot going on in veg at my job.
For sure. You guys have around like 30 cultivars on your list at any given time?
Yes.
Okay.
They like that because
Yeah,
it,
that's a decent list.
yeah. They said more strains better because it helps push product quicker than just having 10 different strains, the same strains. If they have 30 different strains or more,
For sure.
then
Are they usually growing all 30
yeah.
like at any given time?
Yeah. And they keep
Okay.
their moms pretty
That's
long.
impressive, yeah.
They keep their moms all
Wow.
the way till like, I think the most 8 months they've kept their moms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are huge. Are they, I assume then that they're in probably like high bay rooms with like high intensity discharge lighting, like CMH or HPS?
I think they just use Gavita bar lights.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do they have a pretty big growing area for each mom?
Oh
Like,
yeah. There's probably, I want to say like maybe 8 to 10 different tables of the long tables,
Okay.
and probably
Like longer than a 4x8 table?
yes, I think so.
Okay. Like a custom drain table?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
They're
yeah.
feeding like at least like 3 to 4 different strains per table, and like I want to say 10 different. Well, the 3 to 4 strains per table, and like 10 plants per strain.
Okay, so like okay, wow. Oh, so
a
those
lot.
are going to be really, those are big plants. Like
Yeah.
what do they have them,
Oh,
like
yeah.
two across per, like two across on the table?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, those are big moms then.
Oh,
That's pretty
yes.
cool. Yeah, we have like we have 2 tiers on our tables in both our like veg and our mom room, and so but they only have like, I think, 38 inches and 48 inches, or no, 46 inches, something like that. That's like the total height from the tray to the light, so we have to like splay them out as much as we can and keep them really short. And
You have to top them down every week.
we try to top them down every week,
Yeah.
but we are also like a very small team, so sometimes they'll grow into the lights, and we'll usually just be like, well, those are
Oh, man.
gonna get pruned, and then they're gonna grow again, and
Yeah.
they'll be okay. But yeah, I would love to have large high bay ceilings in a veg space, because then you can get really, really big moms.
Oh yeah, they're like trees.
Yeah. So what made you decide to enter from just home growing into the cultivation space?
I really want to make this a career. So I started looking on Craigslist, ZipRecruiter for cultivation jobs. I found a trimming job for this brand High Key on my shirt. High Key is our dispensary that we grow for. My boss is married, and his wife runs High Key, and he runs the grow operations called Fifth Period. And I originally actually applied to be a trimmer for High Key, And when I told
Okay.
them I trim my own flower at home, I grow at home, they're like, hey, we need a grower for cultivation. Would you be interested? And I'm like, hell yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. Because I was going to start off trimming and work my way to cultivation, because that's typically
Sure.
how it works. But I got lucky and just hopped right into flower.
Nice. How do you like the cultivation space? What are some of the things that you like about it? What are some of the things you don't like about it? I feel like everybody has their way of viewing a cultivation job. It can be very grueling.
Yes. So I didn't. I mean, they did tell me in my interview, like, hey, it's a lot of work. It's like a farming job. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I do it at home. I'm ready to do it for a career. So I didn't realize they had 15 different rooms in flower. So, yeah, it's a lot of work. A lot of work. I lost 20 pounds just the first like 2 to 3 months working there, just sweating and busting ass. I literally like feel like I'm running with my head cut off there.
It's one of the like best workouts for a job that I've had.
Yes.
I used to be a chef, and I
Same.
felt like the kitchen kept me fairly fit, and
Yes.
then yeah, doing this is it's at least not making me feel like I need to go to the gym all the time, where I'm like
For sure.
feeling like, oh, I feel like I'm sitting around all the time or something. Like I'm moving all the time at work, and yeah,
After
sweating
work, I come
constantly
home
from the
like,
different heat.
yeah.
Yeah, just tired.
Yes, I don't want to do anything after working, basically. I used to go hiking all the time. I used to hike like 6 to 8 miles. Now I don't even want to do that. I'm like, ugh, work is a lot. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't expect that. I did not expect the grind. I was definitely told in my interview to expect it, but I did not. So, whoever wants to get in the commercial field, expect to bust ass and sweat like a crazy person.
Yeah.
I literally come out
Right.
of the rooms, my hair is just, yeah.
Yeah, it gets pretty crazy. Sometimes I feel like also if you're just like doing some of the really repetitive tasks like moving plants, or like we use these cocoa pots that you hydrate, so you have to like go in and you have to break them up so
Oh,
that the cocoa gets nice and fluffy after you
yeah.
hydrate it.
Like a
And
pillow.
that pretty much, but it like your shoulders and your back afterwards when you're like
Feel
bent
it.
over the trays, because like some of our trays are pretty low to the floor in some of the low ceiling rooms,
You don't
and
sit
we
in
usually
stools?
like, well, so we sit on stools, but it's still
Yeah.
like
You're
I
bending
think
forward.
because yeah, in the low ceiling rooms where we have the two-tier veg space that we'll hydrate these pots on, because we transplant directly into them out of the clone room.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
You say tier? Are you talking about like
So like,
stacking
yeah,
of
like
tables?
stacking, I
Okay.
guess, like two tiers where there's like lights and then a tray, and then lights
Yes.
right below that tray and
Okay.
another tray below it.
You have
And
3?
so yeah, so well, two tiers. So we have
Oh.
two, but it's in a room that has, I think they're like 8.5 foot ceilings, and so there's very limited space, and so we have like the bottom tier is only about like, yeah, that like 4 or 5 inches off the floor. And
Wow.
so like you're still in the stool, but you're like kind of squatted in the stool,
Uncomfortable.
bent over, breaking up the cocoa
Oh my
pots. Yeah, and then
goodness.
breaking up the cocoa pots after you do like 100 or 200 of those, your shoulders are just dying, and
Oh,
that can really be tiresome and a huge
it
workout.
sounds tiring. It
So I'm
sounds
just, yeah,
super tiring.
yeah. But I mean, as you know, it's a grind, and if people are looking to get into it, it's something to really be aware of. That especially in like, I want to say like a hydroponic grow where you're moving a bunch of plants around, that can be a lot of fast paced movement. And then if you're
Oh
working
yeah.
in like a commercial grow that uses organics, and like let's say you're moving plants in to transplant into beds or something, or let's say you're just using large like 7 to 10 gallon pots for the entire cycle,
Oh
and
my
you have
God.
to move those
I
pots
can't
around.
imagine it.
Yeah, yeah, it's like,
Oh
you're
my
picking up
goodness.
40 to 50 pound sacks of
Yeah.
dirt basically each time, because they're usually
Yes.
semi-saturated, and
And I
it,
complain
it is
now.
a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of work for anybody that wants to get into it, and
Oh yeah.
it's good to hear you reiterate that, because but it's a lot of fun also. I feel
Yes.
like when you
Time
like get
flies.
into a good routine, yeah, time flies, and you get into a good routine of it, and
Mm-hmm.
you start to see all the improvements that are being made through your attention to detail and the repetition of the different tasks, as they kind of, as day in and day out, you start to find your groove and be more efficient at different things. And I
Definitely.
love little efficiencies are really nice.
I could speak on that with using the sprayer to spray your plants. We use like a paint sprayer
Mm-hmm.
and the hose. Oh my goodness, I hate it. I struggle with that hose every
Yeah.
time. And it's a nightmare. It gets caught on everything. And you have to prime it so it can get loose, and it's just a pain in the butt, and I hate it. But my coworkers have taught me little like nicks and knacks, how to like tuck it in and keep it away from the table so it doesn't get caught, and like kind of walk with it, and just little tricks to like make time more efficient and not struggle with the hose so much, and do your job and get out of there quicker. Because they expect us to
For sure.
spray every room in 10 minutes per room. It seems fast, and I come out of those rooms dripping sweat because of those hot suits and the mask, and yeah, spraying is...
When you're spraying probably like early flower, so it's really hot and humid in there.
Yes, oh yes, yes. And then
Yeah.
when we do our L3 spray, which is when we spray on the plants with the lights off, we use this little like green light, and it's like on a timer, so when you're in the middle of spraying, the green light will turn off, and then you're in a pitch black room, and you're in that mask and the suit, and you're trying to like not knock into stuff.
Pull your phone out
Yeah,
and
yeah,
start looking
yeah.
around.
It's just a
Yep.
pain in the butt.
I've been there.
But it's fun. I've definitely got quicker. I used to take 20 minutes per room. Now I'm down to 12 minutes a room. I time myself, and I try to do different things to be faster. And that's something I feel like is important in the commercial industry, is there, you have to always look for ways that are more efficient and faster, and that's what they want. They just want you to push, 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 you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like I said earlier on, the pack prices just keep on dropping,
Oh, yeah.
and if they keep going down, but
Especially in Oregon.
the cost of living keeps going up. Yeah, I mean, Oregon kind of is terrible right now.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a joke, but
Your price per pound is sad.
I won't. Yeah, I won't dwell on it too much.
Yeah.
Because our product keeps getting better, and
Good.
it keeps going down in price. So
Ugh.
it's
That's-
frustrating.
that
then,
is frustrating.
cost of living goes up, and everything else keeps getting more expensive. But for some reason, people want better cannabis for lower prices, and
Yeah.
it's like one of those few commodity. I guess a lot of commodities people want like the best for less.
Yeah.
But
Everyone's looking for a deal.
it then sucks to be. Yeah.
Even
It
me,
does suck.
when I go shopping for
Feel like-
cannabis.
I don't blame you. I definitely don't go for like the highest price stuff anymore, because I
No.
just can't afford it, and
Yeah.
like I'll usually only ever look for like concentrates every once in a while, but they're
Same.
just really expensive, and I usually like to just price them out, because I can compare them then to what like we're producing at the grow that I work at and what they're selling for, and like it makes me think of like the back in the days of like Ford Motors when they first started. They made cars that it was like one of his philosophies or whatever, to make cars that were affordable enough for his employees to purchase.
Aw.
Which is a little funny, because then it's kind of like falls in line with the saying of don't get high on your own supply. Like he's just having his employees pay the bills for their own salaries. But maybe that's a conversation for a different podcast.
I have a Ford, so.
For
Yeah.
sure. I
I don't
I
love
used
it,
to have a
but-
Bronco, and it was a fun car, but
Broncos are nice.
Fix or repair daily, right? FORD.
Yeah.
Um,
Fords aren't that great.
so, yeah. No.
No.
Well, so do you feel as though in your home grow, do you feel as though there's anything unique that you do that you have developed through your few grows that you've done that you're like, this is something that I'm going to continue to do because I really like the outcome of it, regardless of what I've heard other people say, or even if you feel as though it's just something that you might have developed through your own experiences?
So this time in this grow, it's kind of hard to see with the bright light, but in my hydro grow, this is my 4th time growing in hydro, and my first time topping twice. The other times I just topped the main stem once, and that was it. And this time I topped the main stem and then the sides so they could all catch up together. It was something I was kind of nervous about doing when I first started growing because it just feels weird to chop at your plant. When you first start growing, it's like, ugh, I don't want to touch it, you know? So when I learned commercially that it's fine to top your plant more than once, or not even top a plant because it's not catching up to the others, I learned you can really, change your yield that way. And I've already seen it. Like, all my tops are at the 3rd net, pretty much. In my other grows, I noticed that a lot of my colas didn't make it to the 3rd net. I always use 3 nets. I was also taught by my teacher, Matt, that using 3 nets is, you have to do it. If you don't use 3 nets, you're going to see a decrease in yield.
Is this in order to like scrog and
Yes.
bring the branches out to fill the canopy?
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. If you're scrogging, that's absolutely.
I love
you gotta
scrogging.
use the 1 to spread it out, and then 2 to capture all the branches as they grow
Exactly.
up to make sure that you're supporting them.
Yep.
I agree with that. I feel like I've now been really trying hard to get away with only 2 trellis nets at work, but we don't do it like we don't train the plants at all once they're in flower. We just let them grow.
Yeah. Same with my job.
And let the side branches kind of fill
Yeah.
the canopy. So usually the 2 works on smaller plants, but then I tend to need 3 on anything that's too big because it just, you got to get those tops so they don't flop over.
Exactly. The flopping over you do not want. So that's why I was taught to always use 3. And I was also taught to wait to defull at the end of week 5, just because the plants need those lower leaves for mobile nutrients and to help photosynthesize.
For sure.
So what I used to do was wait till the end of week 5 and just defull at once. But my mentor told me what I could do is wait till the end of week 5, take off 1 or 2 leaves that are towards the top that are covering colas, and you just take 1 or 2 leaves off every day to not have any stress to your plants, because defulling all those leaves at once causes way too much stress and sets back your growth, is what I was taught.
Yep.
And so he said, yeah, just go ahead and pick off 1 or 2 leaves every day till the end of week 7, and you should have all the leaves off by then. It's like almost a month of
For sure.
defulling 1 to 2 leaves a day. So I'm gonna try that this grow and
You say
see.
like one or 2 leaves per plant?
Yeah. And you start from the top
Nice.
and go to the bottom. So I'm gonna try that this grow
Okay.
and see if I get a better response and yield, maybe. What else? I actually tried some crop steering at home. It's something I just learned recently from the commercial field. They push crop steering really hard commercially, and I've read that it helps yield as well. So I've been trying to learn different techniques to do it here at home. I mean, I don't have a sensor to tell me my drybacks and whatnot, but you can just feel your block and lift it up, see how dry you're getting. So with this grow, I kind of did a crop steer kind of little run just to see. In veg, I did a venerative. Is that how you say it? Venerative?
Vegetative?
Vegetative, yeah. Vegetative.
There's vegetative and generative
Yes.
growth.
Yes. So, yeah, in veg, I did vegetative, where my EC was low, but I had more runoff. I was watering more. And then now that I'm in flower, I'm kind of letting the EC stack, and I have it on irrigation settings to where they're only getting like 3 to 4 shots right now of water. And in veg, I hand water, so I have more of control to like water more and get that. I have a hard time saying vegetative. I can't say.
Vegetative.
Vegetative, yeah. A vegetative steer. So I've been working on crop steering. It's something new to me, something I'm interested in learning. I know it's something valuable to learn in the commercial field.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to implement it at home. So I'm always doing different things every grow.
For sure. I like to tell people that do want to get into the commercial space to learn about what crop steering is, and then I always offer like reach out if you have questions, because it is a frustrating thing to learn, especially when you don't have substrate monitoring, because when people will say things like stack your EC in the substrate, or lean towards a vegetative steer, or lean towards a generative steer, or like do a vegetative environment but a generative irrigation. Those are things that when I first heard about them, I didn't have any idea what people were talking about.
Yeah.
But then over time, like, as you learn about it, you go, okay, so like you can call it like heavy stress versus low stress, where heavy stress leans towards generative and low stress leans towards vegetative. And and then knowing how there's irrigation practices that lean towards one, where generative is like higher ECs, larger drybacks, vegetative is lower ECs, lower drybacks or smaller drybacks, and then the environment where a higher vapor pressure deficit is generative and a lower vapor pressure deficit is vegetative, and then how you can use both of those different things in combination with lighting and CO2. And
do you do this at work?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have to, in order to make sure that we're getting the yields that we want out of each of the rooms. But then to know how to combine them is hard.
Did you first start with your company, like, as a group, like, for starting crop steering, or was something that they already did before you worked there?
So the owner of the company had already started implementing these practices.
Okay.
He took over the company from his parents, and started implementing a lot of these different technical practices that he had learned with other grows, and also he is just a consumer of knowledge and a retainer of knowledge, and can usually apply all that knowledge really accurately. And so we were able to use his experience as well as my experience and knowledge, and we kind of worked on it together, and him doing a lot of the fiddling with stuff in the backgrounds with a lot of hands-on, and me doing most of the hands-on stuff, and then using different
Did you guys run into any issues while doing that, or?
I mean, we've definitely seen how like large plants or starting with large plants in flower can be a problem in some cases, because they just can kind of get away from you if the substrate is improperly sized, or your irrigation practices aren't geared exactly towards reducing the stretch and stuff like that. It's been a huge learning curve, because we change a lot of variables within the grow, whether it be substrate or lighting or temperature parameters or humidity parameters, to try and just find little tweaks here and there to really perfect it. And then we've been trying to also run more strains per room rather than just doing monocrops, because we only have all of our rooms are like 12 light equivalents rooms, and so we only grow 108 plants per room, where it's like nine plants per light.
Okay.
And it we tend to especially with the changing market, and we have a huge library where we keep like over 120 different cultivars on hand at any time, and then we'll usually be flowering out anywhere from like 10 to 15 different cultivars at any time amongst 4 rooms, and so like trying to keep everything like within a balance is kind of what we've been aiming for, where we're trying to find like general practices that can be applied across a multitude of scenarios, versus dialing in a recipe for a specific cultivar in a specific room to like perfect that cultivar.
Yeah.
Like we want to get the best iteration of it out of a general approach that allows for the best possible outcomes without having to make too many fine adjustment tweaks specific to a plant or specific to a room, I guess, because we then can take these ideas and apply them outwards towards helping other people with their grows, whether it be home grows or commercial grows.
I'm sure it also helps with like setting up a room and knowing which plants can, be together for crop steering too.
Yeah.
But I know that also each table you can change too. Do you use GrowLink?
No, we use Open Sprinkler for all of our irrigation, and then Arroyo for all of our monitoring.
Okay.
And those two in conjunction with we use one more thing called Growtronics, but they're actually going out of business, so we need to find a different application for that.
So I'm assuming once you figure out like which plants need what when you're crop steering, it'd be easier to set up a whole room where every plant needs the same amount of shots, and you're not just like doing different shots per table, and it's just like everything's on the same route.
Like, because we're using the same irrigation schedule per table.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do try to match like cultivars with like cultivars, in terms of if they are leaning more on the like I want to stretch and be big and bushy plants, or if I'm short and squat, and because we don't want to like shade out half of the table with another half of the table or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the water consumption is going to be vastly different. But I've run into new cultivars where I haven't seen them grow before, and I don't have the data on it, so I'll just throw it in there on a table with something else and just put like 1 light worth. Just like 9 plants. And like right now I'm running Sherb cocktail number 7 on a table with our beach grapes number 12 that we hunted in house. Nice. And the Sherb cocktail number 7 and beach grapes went in at the same time, but the Sherb cocktail, of course, is 3 times the height of the beach grapes. And because it was a new cultivar, I've been steering that table with data from the Sherb cocktail, because I wanted to see how it responded to the irrigations and stuff, because I've already seen the beach grapes and I can kind of gauge if it's going a little bit too vegetative based on the leaf growth and the flower morphology, or if it is leaning towards like a generative, or if it's kind of a nice mixed medium of the two. And oddly enough, they're roughly using about the same water. I think the beach grapes are getting just slightly overwatered, and leaning a little bit vegetative, but it's surprising to me that the biomass of the Sherb cocktail has got to be at least 1.5 times the beach grapes overall, in terms of like if I were to cut down both plants wet right now, I'd say the Sherb cocktail is going to be like 1.5 times the weight, but it's not transpiring at 1.5 times what the beach grapes is, which is really fascinating.
So is that something you do
like
though?
That.
Do you match like cultivars with like irrigations, if that makes sense?
I mean, ideally that would be where we try to match cultivars on the same table. Yeah, absolutely. And usually we do that based off of structure because uh, like size plants
Yeah.
usually use about the same amount of water, but then there are plants that are just not heavy drinkers.
Yeah.
They don't assimilate the nutrients as fast, and so they don't need as much water. And maybe their stomata, like the density of their stomata on the leaves might be lesser or something than the other plants where they just don't have the ability to transpire as greatly as some other plants do. It makes me think of like Mac 1. Mac 1 is a really slow grower. It seems like I water her half as much as some of the other plants that are moms. Because we hand water all our moms so that we like pick up each plant, make sure that it gets a good dry back so that we don't not running into any like hypoxia related root issues where they're just like going anaerobic or anything like that. But yeah, it's really fascinating to see how different cultivars react differently and how you can then try to find matching cultivars to put together so that you can grow them under the same irrigation strategies and in the same environment. And that has been a huge challenge, and that's where it's like
Yeah.
we haven't really been leaning towards making like recipes for cultivars that I heard a lot of people would do with their irrigation practices and environmental practices because yeah, in today's market you have to have so many flavors available
Yeah.
that you can't really dedicate all of your space to like so we have 4 flower rooms. We can't just have 4 cultivars available.
Yeah.
It's not
It's not.
it it doesn't really work for us.
Mm-hmm.
Even at like the lower packs that we produce, you know, each harvest is only 30 to 36 pounds. So, but even amongst that, like nobody wants 30 pounds of one strain in
Yeah.
Oregon at this point of high quality weed because
I think everywhere.
they're going to sell it for more.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unfortunate because the price keeps going down to the grower, but then the price in the
Yeah.
dispensary is consistent or goes up for some of the high quality like top shelf stuff. And yeah, it's a weird market right now for sure. It's almost like one of those things where we just have to like hold on and hope that things adjust and not necessarily like improve as though like we know what that could be, but it something needs to change.
For sure.
So, you know, speaking of change, now that you've worked in the cannabis industry for a little bit and you've been doing your home grow and you've been an active participant within the community, posting on Instagram, looking at what other people are doing, interacting. I don't know if you go to, since you're in like kind of an area where there's a lot of cannabis events and stuff. I don't know if you're like attending any of these. I think you went to MJ BizCon
I did.
this year. So like by immersing yourself more into the industry and the community, where do you feel as though some changes could be? Like what would you want to see change in the community, I guess, and or the industry as a whole, home grow, commercial, anywhere in between?
Well, back when we were talking about, remember how I mentioned strawberry cough, and I thought it would be tall, because it's a sativa, but I was going to mention, is that because nowadays we only have polyhybrid strains, and nothing's truly sativa, nothing's truly indica now. It's just pretty much all hybrid. I want to change that or go back to like where you can just smoke straight indica or, you know, get some straight sativa. I think consumers think still that they're getting sativa and indica, but it's not. Everything's hybrid.
No.
And I think
Yeah, and there's not a lot of commercial producers that would want to grow a sativa that takes 12 to 14 weeks to flower because
you're right.
that's almost 2 full flower cycles of something that is more of a squatter, non-equatorial
So realistically,
indica.
yeah.
Yeah.
So profit-wise, it's not smart to do that.
Yeah. You can't charge twice for a sativa.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things because it does take about twice the amount of input.
Makes sense.
But I hear you because there are some people that are still doing it,
Yeah.
and they're just making it a small part of their crop. But it's also one of the reasons why I am so heavily advocating for home grow is because somebody at home can absolutely take their time
Oh,
to
yeah.
grow out something like Panama Red, where they're gonna flower it for 120 days. That's just, to me, I'm like, when I think 120 days in flower, that is crazy.
Ugh.
I don't keep, like, I feel like I will cut from a mom, clone, like, take that, clone it, veg it, flower it out, and like that whole cycle of like even growing the mom to make that cutting all together, that doesn't take 120 days.
Yeah.
And but of
Yeah.
course I'm thinking of it from a commercial standpoint and
For
from
sure.
like a production standpoint. But for like the home grower who wants Panama Red, like, go for it. That's awesome.
Yeah. Just more patience.
Yeah.
To get
But it sounds like you want more of that in the industry, in terms of you want it to be less of a polyhybrid
yeah.
cesspool,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Because when I was a dispatcher at like a black market delivery company, we would lie to customers. The customers would say, "Oh, I want OG Kush," and we didn't have that. We would just be like, okay, and just write down OG Kush on the bag and then give them whatever, you know. And a lot of consumers think they're getting what they're ordering, or they think they're getting a straight indica or straight sativa, and that's just not how it is these days. And I didn't realize that until I became a grower.
Yep. So when you were like working through as dispatching for like this illicit service, you didn't realize at the time that it wasn't
Yeah.
that they weren't necessarily being truthful about what they were providing for people.
Yeah, and I felt awful lying to customers and telling them, "Oh yeah, you're getting Paris OG. That's what you're getting." And they asked me, "Oh, is it good?" And I'm just like, "Sure," you know. And I felt bad lying, but
Oh.
it's part of like their sales tactic. And even if like we had a strain that said like Paris OG, and we ran out of that strain, even though it wasn't Paris OG, they would lie and be like, "Oh yeah, we still have it," and then just grab another thing off the shelf and just package it. And I don't know, I think it's not fair to lie to consumers about what you're giving them, because some people look for
Yeah.
something specific, you know, and some consumers want that specific strain, and that helped them in whatever moment that they were, you know, dealing with, and that helped them. And people look for that, you know. And I feel
Absolutely.
like nowadays it's all a lie, because like you're not getting straight indica, you're not getting straight sativa anymore. Like that's not a thing anymore. So I dislike that a lot.
I can agree with that. I feel like truth in marketing is something that needs to be a thing.
But like you said, as a grower, to have to grow it for way longer because it's a sativa, and it kind of ruins production in a way, or, you know, like just sets you back financially for people that are trying to, you know, push their product off the shelf, and they're having to spend more labor and time to grow something that takes longer. I totally see why it, you know, the industry only has polyhybrids, but I don't think it's fair for consumers.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are some polyhybrids or other hybrid strains out there where they do try to breed for the effects of something that would have been a traditional sativa, but to put it in a plant that is a more squat, easy to control plant, something that isn't going to take 120 days, because even that alone, it's a very hard thing to do, to keep a plant alive that long, especially through a flowering period where you're, you know, after a certain time you don't want to spray for pests, and after a certain time you know, if you have too many temperature and humidity fluctuations, especially with the flower structures of some of these equatorial plants being so large, you risk mold, and you risk other pathogen and rot, and just a multitude, you know, nutrient deficiencies, other things as well, just when you grow something for that long. That is such a high demand plant, because cannabis, it just eats so much compared to something like a cactus or a little bonsai tree or something where you can feed it once a year or something. So I do see how like the polyhybrids could become something where it is like, it's almost like devious to tell people it's a sativa when it's not.
No.
But if that's where like a lot of these things that are like indica, sativa,
Yeah.
high THC, I feel like a lot of it is like we just got it wrong as an industry, and we need to probably lean more towards a complete, more holistic understanding of how all the different constituents come together, and whether it be like an entourage effect or however else people would like to describe it. And then also to understand that every person's endocannabinoid system is unique and different. And so by finding something that does work for them, it could completely, like you could completely find a terpene and cannabinoid profile now in something that only takes 9 weeks to grow. And then find that same terpene and cannabinoid profile in something that takes 12 weeks to grow. That's completely possible now with the genetic diversity that we have available. But I feel like as a grower, that something that's a sativa or something that is like an equatorial land race of some kind is supposed to take a long time to grow. And as a grower, you're looking at it and saying, well, who's growing these long sativas and where can I get it?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like definitely for like a home grower, or not a home grower, but just a consumer.
Yeah.
But just a consumer, right? Someone's just like, I just want something that makes me, feel productive or artistic or upbeat, or like want to go on a hike. And they're like, that's a sativa. Or someone who's just like, no, I just want to sit on the couch, play video games, get the munchies because I need to eat because I haven't eaten all day.
Yeah.
And then they go, and that's an indica. So I feel as though there's just a lot of different misconceptions in terms of what sativa and indica are, because like indica, as the term indica, it actually means of India, and sativa, just as the term itself, means cultivated. So there's other plants that use these monikers within their naming schema to designate that it is a cultivated plant, or that it is a plant that has of Indian descent, outside of cannabis. And
I did
so
not know this.
that's sometimes where and this is sometimes where like a lot of people are because of the illegality of cannabis, at least this is my explanation, because of the illegality of cannabis, we have used certain terminologies that are not accurate to other aspects of agriculture, and cannabis is so truly related to agriculture. It is agriculture in a sense.
I wish they'd make it that.
To use these, but to use these terms that have an agricultural meaning to every other agricultural industry in the world, and then are used differently in cannabis, does tend to confuse a lot of the public when it comes to consumers, because they're given these different terms as, this is what this means, this is what that means, even if it was something that was developed like in the shadows and in an illicit market in a time where, saying, hey, let me get some of that really awesome cannabis that puts me to sleep. No one's going to listen to you when you say that if you're like picking up a dime bag or a dub sack back 15, 20 years ago.
They're like, oh yeah, I got it, just like they do now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see how like a little bit more like honesty and a little bit more
or maybe just education. Yeah.
It feels like feels like education is heavily needed, not only for the producers and the purveyors of cannabis, but also for the consumers.
For sure. Yeah, because when I worked in being a dispatcher, that was like my number one questions I would always get from consumers was like, oh, what's your best sativa? What's your best indica? And I'm just like,
Yep.
So I think people really need to educate consumers that it's not like that. And I didn't even realize indica meant
No.
from India and sativa was meant like cultivated. So that was really cool that you taught me that. Thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's important for people to know that these terms are used outside of cannabis, and they're not solely designated to the cannabis industry, even though we've appropriated them into something that they aren't originally. It's very fascinating. The cannabis industry appropriates a lot of different things that it may not be the best to appropriate.
Yeah.
But you know, I feel like a lot of different groups and industries do that. So considering that you started your growing journey so recently, I feel like you're a great person to ask, what were some of the pitfalls that you found early on in growing that you were able to learn from, that you would want to then relay that information to another new grower who's just getting into it, so that they can avoid it, like, so that they can learn from your mistakes, basically.
Don't buy CO2. That is a waste of time.
For a home grow, for sure. In
Yeah.
a tent, for sure.
I mean, my teacher, Matt, he was like, why aren't you using CO2? And I'm like, honestly, because it was just expensive for me. Like, if I could afford it, I would do it, but I really just can't. So if it's something you can afford, do it, but it's not crucial. What else? I think that a lot of people should try Rockwool Grow. A lot of people are afraid to grow in Rockwool. I talk to a lot of soil growers. Soil growing is, more common. And a lot of soil growers have told me they're afraid to grow in Rockwool, and they don't want issues, problems. And it's funny because I'm experiencing the opposite. I haven't experienced any issues or problems in Rockwool, but I have seen some deficiencies and issues in soil. So, and I think a lot of people should just try different ways of growing, not just be stuck to one thing. Expand your knowledge and learn different ways of how to get better. And for me, I watch YouTube videos every day of how to grow and different stages and what to do. And I watch a lot of drying and curing videos just because I want to perfect that stage. I think drying and curing is the most important step of growing. A lot of people might say otherwise, but I mean, you can grow a beautiful flower and then dry it and cure it terribly, and then it ends up being a mid instead of, top shelf. And I think that sucks because you put in all this hard work, you're expecting, oh, I grew this shit beautifully, it's going to be perfect, and then when you dry it and cure it, you're like, what the heck? So, yeah, my first dry, I experienced that hay smell, and I was petrified and thought, my harvest was ruined, but luckily, it went away. So, I mean, it was okay. I feel like I'm still learning how to properly dry and cure. I had mentioned to you that I threw my trim in the freezer with popcorn nugs, and I checked on it like a month, maybe almost 2 months later, just to make some edibles, make cannabis butter out of. And I saw the popcorn nugs in there, and they were looking beautiful, and I was like, ooh. So I went to go pick them up to see if they crumbled, and they didn't. They were perfect. They were still kind of sticky too. So I don't know, it got me on an idea of can I cure this way? So I don't know. I mean,
For sure.
I might just try one.
I think low temp curing is a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I liked how it looked. The flower tasted better. The color was still there. It seemed like the trichomes were still, intact. Like when I compared my dried cured to what I did in jars to the freezer cure, it just looked so much different, smelled different. The freezer cure was better. So I am a little
That's so
nervous.
fascinating.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous to, cure in the freezer, but I'm going to try it. Not my whole harvest, but I'm going to try like a jar or something. I don't know what to do yet.
And you're gonna, and just so like the listeners know, but like it sounds like your plan is to dry it fully,
Yes.
put it in a jar and seal it in that jar.
Yes.
At room temperature, and then put that sealed jar in the freezer.
Yes.
And then when you want to check on it, your plan is to then pull it out of the freezer, let it sit at room temp until it comes to room temperature, and
Yeah.
then open the jar to test the buds, just to avoid any sort of condensation or moisture that could form on the flower itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I
Try it.
I think it's a great idea, because I've heard of other people saying that they'll store cannabis that they want to come back to long term, either in the fridge or, I feel like I might have even heard it in the freezer before, but it was one of those things that I was like, well, I'm not going to be trying that, because
Yeah.
anytime I did grow at home, it was I couldn't keep the flower around long enough. I wanted to smoke it all. I feel like those are all great little tidbits of advice for new growers.
Yeah, what do you think? You think I should just try it and see what happens? I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, I think you should. I think you should try it.
Okay.
That method.
Okay. Yeah, drying
and just
it
do
for
it
a
with,
week
like,
in the tent. Try to do my 60-60.
Maybe put like one really nice flower in there.
Okay.
And then the rest just popcorn nugs or stuff that you wouldn't mind making into edibles, like you're talking about. Just because that way it's not necessarily a
Ruined
huge
or-
loss to
Okay.
lose one nice bud, but that you can see how that one nice bud turns out. But yeah, I definitely suggest getting it fully dried all the
Yeah.
way to where like you could smoke it if you wanted to, but
Mm-hmm.
you want to cure it to help reduce a little bit of the harshness, let the enzymatic
Absolutely.
process continue.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'd say try it. Why not? I mean, all these things that we experiment with as home growers, that that can be documented and relayed to other home growers. If it is helpful, then why not? Especially, it makes me think of like if somebody can only grow one crop a year outdoor, but they want it to stay fresh because they really like fresh flower, versus something that's been cured at a higher temperature for a longer period of time. Because even some people like that sort of peppery cannabis where everything off gases other than the caryophyllene, where it's like just really peppery and spicy. But I know some people like that, especially in like hashes and stuff. But if somebody wanted fresh flower and they were able to take all this outdoor that they grow and dry it up really nice, and then trim it up and manicure it to what they like, and then get it into some airtight container that they can then freeze, and then pull as they need to throughout the year to supply what their needs are. I feel like somebody can easily grow what they need in a year in an outdoor plot if they have the ability for it, and it's a lot cheaper. So it might be a great way for people to keep flower around for longer and enjoy fresh cannabis throughout the year. So I'm sure that there's a niche opportunity there for other people to learn from this and to apply it in different ways.
Yeah, because I
So
tried Googling it.
keep a good log of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried Googling it, and there's not much on Google about it. I saw a lot of like Reddit comments on it, and other people have tried it. They say use a frost-free freezer. I've even came across people drying in a fridge. So I don't know. I mean,
Sure.
I just want to do like what makes the best cure, because I noticed, like I told you, when I looked at my cured buds in the mason jars, and then I looked at the cured bud from the freezer, the color was better, the taste, the smell was better from the freezer. So I was just like, I guess it's more fresh, like you're saying. So
Yeah. I mean,
I loved it.
terpenes off gas so rapidly.
yeah,
Even at lower temperatures, there's some that will just off gas over time, and so like it seems like the only way to combat that is completely limiting light exposure, completely or reducing the temperature significantly, reducing the oxygen contact. So that's another thing too. If you keep it in a sealed jar, through the enzymatic process, a lot of the oxygen is going to be used up, and so you won't even have like an oxidative factor on the terpenes after a certain amount of time if it was like cured properly in the jar, and you like just got it to that last point where it was still just like that last 1 or 2% of curing, and just throw it right into the freezer. At that point, it sounds like it would work perfectly. So that's awesome. I feel like it seems like, from what I've gathered so far from our conversation, some of the stuff that you do is you try new stuff out, and you try to remember what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then you try to say, how can I apply what works? And then how can I understand how it works? Mm-hmm. And I feel like those aspects for a grower are so important, because they allow for a more thorough understanding of the processes of growing and curing and all the different aspects of what cultivating and producing cannabis entail. And like, if you're always trying to improve those things and glean the best practices off of them, it helps just in so many different ways. And it really, like, I feel like the culmination of knowledge and information as a cultivation journey continues, you can like really make these leaps and bounds in the quality of what's being produced, that I feel like a lot of people go, how did you do that? Like, how did you get this good so fast or something? It's like just repetition, applying what works and removing what doesn't.
Yeah.
It's like, there's not, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but there are some aspects of it that can be really simplified down to use what works, remove what doesn't work, take time and have patience, and you'll learn from it.
And I think change is good. A lot of growers get stuck in their routine and how they do things, and they think that's what works. But I think if you're open to change and open to learning different ways, then you're going to be the best grower out there, because you're not just stuck in being stubborn and like, oh, this is right. Like, there's no really right and wrong way. Like, you can evolve and change and get better every time.
There are so many times where people have asked me, how did you grow that flower? Like, when they've seen something on my Instagram or something, and I'll say, I do it this way. And they'll say, oh, I've never wanted to try hydroponics because I've been growing in living soil for 20 years and I've been happy with the results. I think I grow like the best cannabis.
Yeah.
I go, well, just because you've been doing something for 30 years doesn't necessarily mean that you've been doing it correctly, or that
we're the best.
That you can't learn anything else. Like it does sometimes, that fixed mindset does hinder a lot of growers, I feel like. So it's good to always be learning and always be trying new things and applying those lessons learned from trying out new things.
Yeah, and definitely.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice.
Growers need to reach out and get help and not be prideful and be like, oh, well, like, this is how I learned and this is how I'm sticking to it. Like, no, like, ask for help. That's how you can learn and get better.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation and interview.
Thank you.
And those are actually all the main questions that I have. But I do always wrap up the podcast with a couple of the kind of ubiquitous questions, just that I feel like every cannabis podcast needs to ask. So since we didn't touch on this earlier on in the podcast, what was your first cannabis smoking experience? Or your first one that you remember?
My first one was with my sister. She gave me a pipe and I smoked out of it. I didn't know to use like the carb part, so I didn't know what I was doing.
Okay.
I just inhaled and, I didn't really feel high. I don't think I did it right. But I just started smoking with friends in high school and learning different ways to smoke and how to like create things to smoke with. Like, I even smoked out of a pizza by cutting through the crust all the way, and you pack the end of the crust and then you hit the other side. It's weird,
That's
but
funny.
you know, like fun ways to smoke. I've done it out of a strawberry, out of a potato, you know, made your own bong out of, you know, a water bottle with a pencil. Um, but my funniest smoking memory would be I was at Sunset Cliffs, a really famous place in San Diego for great views, so I'd always go there to smoke. It's by the beach, and me and my friends hotbox my car, and I get a knock on my window, and sure enough, it's a cop. And I'm like, fuck.
Oh no.
And it's literally like Cheech and Chong movie. Like I had to roll down my window, and the smoke just like flew on his face. And he's
Pours
just
out.
yes. And I was just like, oh no, I'm fucked. And he's like, oh, what are you guys doing? Just chilling? And we're like, yeah, we're just chilling. And he's like, oh, it sure smells like it. And then he just said, like, you guys could just stay here, get, you know, let it wear off, wait for an hour, and then you can go home. And I was like, oh, thank God, I got a nice one. So I was lucky for that.
I've heard a few stories like that where the cops just were like, just don't leave for an hour.
Exactly.
Or if one of you didn't smoke and they're sober and can drive, get
They're
the hell
usually
out of
nice
here.
about it, yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like since it is just like a decriminalized thing now, especially in California, where you're only going to get a fine. They just have to. They know, like.
Well, at the time, it was
I don't know,
illegal.
I feel like
when I was 16,
okay.
it was illegal. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, that's definitely a funny story, and one that I would have
I got
also
lucky.
just been kind of. Yeah, I would have been shitting bricks. That would have been quite nerve-wracking.
First thing I did was grab my keys out the ignition. I threw it. I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to get a DUI for smoking. So I was petrified. But
we used to put our keys in the gas cap
oh,
if we'd hotbox our cars. So we'd like take them out, pop the gas cap, put them in there, because then they're outside of the car.
that's smart.
And I know my one buddy got rolled up on one time. And same thing, they were like hotboxing, rolled down the window, smoke poured out, and the cop's like, were you guys planning on driving? And they're like, no, we were just using this to smoke, an officer. And he's like, well, how do I know that? Show me your keys. And they're like, they're in the gas tank, or in the gas cap. And the cop was like, oh, that's pretty smart. All right, I'll let you off this time. And it's just like, I can't believe that worked. I mean, obviously he could have made up the story,
Yeah.
but that was the one
Or
that I
just
heard.
been an
and
asshole.
Every time I heard that, I was like, oh, put it in the gas cap.
Did you ever play like
yeah.
where they called it baseball, where you had to smoke and then you pass it to your friend and you have to go in a circle and then you can exhale when you get it back?
I feel like potentially at one point when I was younger, we did something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like it was always just like puff, puff, pass, and you'd hold it in as long as you could anyways, because usually it was like 7 or 8 of you sharing one joint or one blunt, and it was gonna, you only are gonna get 3, maybe 4 hits off of it before it's gone. So you really would try to conserve and get the best effects possible out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are funny stories. So just a couple more of these questions here then. So what is your favorite strain of all time? Whether it be one that you've grown that you really enjoy growing, or one that you've smoked that is just like your favorite smoke.
So I really love any OG strains, especially the original strains back in the day. Like we spoke about finding those good oldie strains. I love Skywalker OG, Paris OG, King Louis. I even like Blue Dream, Sour Diesel, the old strains.
Okay.
But
stuff from like 10 years ago or so.
Exactly. I wish they would bring those back too more in the industry. And for growing, I really enjoy growing Green Crack. It's what I'm growing right now. It's a resilient strain. It doesn't stress out ever. You can top the crap out of it and it's still going to grow super tall. And
That's cool.
It drinks a lot. So, I don't know. I love it. It's beautiful. It's fun to grow. It's easy.
I remember living in Sacramento. I was going to Sacramento State many years ago, and at the time, medical like 215 was available, and so I had my medical card, and there was this dispensary that had green crack, and it was like, it seemed like there was more trichomes than weed, or than like actual flower.
Good.
Whenever we would get it, and it was crazy. And I look back on it now that I've grown for as long as I have, and I'm almost positive that they were dumping like all the different keefs that they would get from their different trimmers onto the bags of green crack, because it was the most expensive one that they were selling, and it was,
It's
you know,
very
they were
popular.
like claiming 40% THC or something, and this was back in like 2009. And so
I hate that shit.
I always like think back on that, and I'm like, this is, yeah, they definitely were doing something to it, but I really liked it.
I can
I
say
mean, it worked really well as medicine.
it's the first plant that started getting super frosty right away before the others. So
Cool. Well, maybe it does just look like that. I've never
Yeah.
actually seen it grown, because it was one of those ones that was, it wasn't
see.
available in the commercial market when I started.
can you see good? Or the light is the light too
You
bright?
know, it's a little choppy, but the overall canopy looks great.
Yeah, it's the tall ones in the back are the green crack, and they're just loving it.
Well, I'll tell anybody to go to at Autumn Grows Dro on Instagram, and you can see updated pictures of her grow, and the green crack and the other strawberry cough and other things that you're growing.
Yeah.
And I'll just tell them to go there to see it, because it's going to look a lot better.
Yeah.
Especially if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you aren't seeing any of the video recording. But if you are, go over to YouTube and listen up there on our premieres. So just one more question, actually. So favorite strain currently sounds like it's green crack, but if you've kind of gained an appreciation for a specific breeder since you've started growing, who would you currently say is your favorite breeder if you had to choose one?
I'm gonna go with Jungle Boys. I love them.
Okay,
They're my favorite.
cool.
They're basically all I smoke when I do go buy flour and wax. I really like 710 Labs though for some concentrates.
Cool.
And yeah, I wanted to shout out my mentor, Matt Brett. He's taught me everything I know, and he's amazing, and he'll help you guys grow, and he'll answer any questions you have.
Nice. And do you know his Instagram off the top of your head?
Yes, it's Cannabis Science __ on Instagram, and then he has a YouTube channel, just Cannabis Science on YouTube.
Cool.
Yes.
Well, awesome. I think that that about wraps us up there. So, Autumn, again, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation, and to kind of help shed a little bit more light on the different growing methods that you use and your growing journey so far. You know, I feel like when people hear that new growers are getting this much success in a home grow and being able to do it with you know, financial restrictions and working around those to still make it work, I feel like it makes a lot more home growers hopeful about being able to do this and find success in it, so that they can either grow their own medicine, start a new hobby, or even use it as a way to pivot into the cultivation space professionally. So I feel like you exemplify a lot of those different aspects. And so yeah, thank you again so much for joining me, and I really appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thanks everybody.